are some of the oldest family memories going back to the beginnings of our family that you can remember?
Well, my family always told me that we immigrated from England and Scotland and Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And also on my dad's side, my great-great-grandmother was half Native American, either Comanche or Cherokee. Her name was Wingo.
Mm-hmm.
My great-grandfather was a pastor. He had 13 children, and my grandmother was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
They lived on a farm. The earliest things that I remember them talking about were, my grandfather having a wagon run over his leg when he was a teenager. He was born in 1897, so that's probably 1914 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then my grandmother remembers, she was born in 1899, going to school in one of the first cars, probably a Model A,
Wow.
that her town even had. No one had ever seen it. And that was also probably in the teens, 19-teens.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the earliest memories that I remember our family talking about.
Awesome. And so, prior to 1922, where were they living for the most part?
This is all in West Texas,
Mm-hmm.
in Abilene, Texas, and Coleman, Texas. Also in a couple other small towns outside of Coleman, Texas. Glen Cove was one of them, and McCamey.
Yeah.
So yeah, all little towns,
That's
West
awesome.
Texas.
All right, and then along those lines, how far back can you name specific people in your family? You mentioned Wingo, but other people far back. You don't necessarily need to do people recently, just as far back as you can.
Well, I was told that we have Quakers in our background
Mm-hmm.
on my mom's side. I was also told that on my mom's side that the Amix family came from Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And that my Uncle Charles did his family tree, and he traced his side of the family all the way back to one hilltop in Kentucky.
That's crazy.
And after that, he didn't ask any more questions. So, sounds like a little bit of inbreeding there.
Yeah. But like
and then my grandmother's family came from Alabama.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather's family came from Missouri, and somehow they all met up in Texas. On my mom's side, they came from Chanute, Kansas, and settled down in Texas. In Arkansas, that whole area, they came from that area. But I don't know specific memories of certain people before that.
Yeah,
So
that's good. And then we were talking about this earlier, but are there any heirlooms that you could think of? There wasn't a ton, but we thought of a few things.
well, I know that it's important to us, my mom's piano and desk,
Mm-hmm.
the old fold-down desk, and the rocking chair that she had as a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
That all came from, when I was a little boy, and when she was a little girl
Mm-hmm.
in the 30s and 40s, that we've kept in the family and we hope to pass along. I remember also seems like we had some dolls at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they are now. But other than that, there's nothing specific. We did have a shotgun at one point. It was a family heirloom, and it was pawned off by it was an ill-advised sale years ago that is now in the hands of somebody that doesn't realize it's special. So
It's too bad.
yeah.
So yeah, that goes right along with my other question was where are they now? And obviously we don't know where that gun
We don't know
is.
where the gun is, but
Yeah.
we have the piano here. The chair's right next to you, actually, the rocking chair.
Right here.
And then your sister's using my mom's desk.
Yeah.
And those things are becoming antique already.
Yeah.
Because my mom was born in 1932,
Yeah, almost 100 years old.
so we're talking about some old stuff here that we hope to keep in our family.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on to an area that I know we've talked about in the past, but how active was our family in the church as far back as you know? I remember you mentioning someone was this pastor, like the pastor that had 13 kids or something like that.
I heard that there was a Quaker on my mom's side. I found my grandmother's Bible study or devotion from the 40s during World War II with her own personal notes on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that my grandmother, my mom's mother, was a believer. And then on my dad's side, my grandmother was the 13th child of a pastor, Church of Christ pastor. And so there's preachers in our family, and then my grandfather was an elder in the Church of Christ and consistent member. And then my mother and father were Christians, my mom being the most fervent prayer warrior in our family, and the one that was closest to the Lord. But that's as many generations back as I know at this point.
Yeah, that's cool. And then I know you've mentioned this to me before, a couple of things along these lines, but can you describe your family's activity in pertinent historical events like the Buffalo Gap thing that you mentioned to me in the past?
Yeah, and my great-grandfather, who was an entrepreneur and had settled in West Texas in the Buffalo Gap, Abilene area, had started a wholesale grocery company, and at that time was talked into moving the county seat from Buffalo Gap at midnight, grabbed all the papers and moved it to Abilene. And so they did kind of a force play and made Abilene the county seat.
Making it the center of industry.
Center of industry.
Yeah.
And then he had this idea to start wholesale groceries, so all the retail people in the area in West Texas started buying from him. And then he noticed because there was two parallel railroads without a vertical piece of railway to connecting them in the Abilene area, he built a railroad, the Roscoe Snyder Pacific Railway, and also started shipping his groceries that way and then charging anybody else that used his railway.
Yeah.
And then he drilled for oil in the easement for the railway.
Yeah.
And struck oil and was able to build a large hotel cash during the Depression in Abilene.
In partnership with...
He knew Mr. Hilton,
yeah.
but they decided not to be partners, and Mr.
Okay.
Hilton went to New York, and we know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And then, so they had this hotel and movie theater during the Depression. My mother was able to enjoy that, and he was successful in doing that, and it's still there to this day. It's the tallest building in that part of Texas, and it's now placed with condominiums, and still restored and doing great. And the theater is also being used as well.
It was super cool getting to see it a couple years back.
So they have some historical markers
Yeah.
in Snyder with an old engine from the railway,
Yeah.
and then also in front of the hotel in Abilene.
Yeah, that was great.
The Hotel Wooten.
That was great. You hit on 2 points that I was going to go after: the historical events and standout achievements. So now I'll move on to our last 2 questions. The first of those being, how has this heritage that we're talking about, did it in any way inspire you as you went along through your upbringing? Did it inspire you to greatness or not?
Well, you know what? I really didn't fully understand the implications. I knew that my mom was from a good family, and I knew that when her parents died in a plane crash in 1948, that her inheritance helped me go through college. And I'm grateful because that inheritance provided a down payment for the home that we have now.
Exactly.
So because of my great-grandfather's hard work in West Texas in the late 1800s, we have a house today
Yes.
for our family, which is amazing because I'm a school teacher and don't have the resources that a lot of people have in our area. So I was grateful for that. As far as being inspired, you know, my mother just instilled in me the belief that I could do whatever I wanted to do, that I had a good brain, I was going to go to college, and she supported that and paid for college. And so she just had a great faith in God working through me, even though at the time I was rebellious. But she instilled confidence in me, and I think that confidence must have come from her family and her dad, and his dad because they were so successful in all the things that they did.
Yes.
And then on my father's side, he was always encouraging hard work and character and values. And he went to work every day of his life and loved work. And so I was really inspired to find work that I would enjoy and not to just work for money.
Yeah, definitely.
Although, you know, Zig Ziglar said, I've had money and I haven't had money and I'd rather have it. I knew I needed it.
Yeah.
But seeing my dad enjoy his work in the oil business, and want to go every day, made me want to work at something that was enjoyable, but also meaningful, you know, and that was important to me. My mother raised me to appreciate the arts. She took me to the symphony. She always had me in art classes and encouraged all my creativity. And that was, my mother had a big input in my life that got me into art direction and graphic design and photography that I still enjoy so much of today. Seeing the world and as through as an aesthetic gem.
Yeah.
So that came from my mom.
Yeah.
So, and then I was inspired by my father to always make good connections with people and build relationships. He said, you never want to burn a bridge because you never know when you have to cross back over that bridge. And so I've been really encouraged over the years to build relationships, and I know that everything flows through relationships. And then back to the heritage, just knowing that I had that heritage, I would like to continue that in a positive way.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Hitting on all aspects of that. And then, this has been you did a really thorough job describing our heritage and history, but is there any other part of it that we didn't touch on that you think is important? Or is that sufficient?
Well, you know what? You read about a lot of families that have a lot of, the legacy is negative, and the ripple effect can go one way or the other.
Yes.
And just looking at our family from both of my grandparents and how we've turned out so far, I can just see God's hand in our life and the answers to the prayers, especially, I think more our mothers than our fathers. And so I'm grateful for that, and I just want to continue that legacy and continue to build on our generation and build into your generation so that we will have this repeating itself through the years and have a strong family line that worked hard but always gave credit where credit's due and followed God's plan for our lives. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was really enjoyable, actually.